Hey friends, Pastor Bill Walden here with Build Up the Church. God bless you. Hope you're doing super great. This is a devotional word for August 24th, 2024, out of the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 7. If you're old enough to remember this, you'll know what I mean when I ask you a question. Where were you on September 11th, 2001? If you're old enough, you remember that was the day that the World Trade Center had two airplanes flown into them and thousands of lives were lost. If you had written to me asking for advice before September 11th, and I was writing back to you on September 12th, and I said something like this: because of how things are now, I recommend that, and then fill in the blank. So you and I would understand what the current situation was. We want to remember that the Apostle Paul is writing back to the Corinthians. They had written him a letter asking him a lot of questions, and some of those questions had to do with marriage. And is it better to be married or unmarried? If you're married, is it a good idea to get a divorce so that you can be fully committed to the Lord? Paul said, no, stay married. They asked, if I'm married to an unbeliever, is it a good idea to get divorced since they're not a Christian, I am? And that way I can be more committed to the Lord. Paul said, no, remain married unless they want to leave you. They had asked him questions about sexuality. Is it better for us to abstain from sex so that we can have more pure lives, since sexual immorality is so rampant in Corinth and we want to fight against it? Would it be better if we just cut it out of our lives altogether? And Paul said, no, you don't want to do that either, because you'll be tempted. And also that God has given the sexual relationship to a husband and wife as a blessing. And so he's answering all these questions. And once again, we want to remember that they knew about a current situation and he knew about a current situation. We don't know about that current situation. But keep in mind, he's writing to them about some specific things. So we want to take his words with that understanding. So he is writing to them now about unmarried people and widows. How should we live? Pick up the story here, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 25. Now concerning virgins, and that's not just unmarried women, it translates better concerning those who are unmarried. Maybe you're a widow, or maybe your spouse abandoned you, or something like that. Concerning the unmarried, Paul says, I have no commandment from the Lord. In other words, Jesus didn't teach on this specific item that I'm going to speak about. Yet I give judgment as one whom the Lord in his mercy has made trustworthy. So Paul's not saying that this is just my opinion apart from what God says. He's saying Jesus never taught about this, but I believe I have his mind and heart on the matter. Verse 26, I suppose therefore that it is good because of the present distress. Once again, for us that would be the September 12th. If I was writing to you and I said because of the present distress, we would both know what I meant. We don't know what Paul meant, and we don't know what was going on in Corinth. It is speculated that Nero had started his great persecution of the Christians, the arrest and torturing and the execution of Christians. If that was the case, it wasn't a good time to start a family. It wasn't a good time to get married because things were so unsteady. So the Apostle Paul said, I suppose, therefore, that this is good because of the present distress, that it's good for a man to remain as he is. Don't make any changes. Are you bound to a wife? Don't seek to be loosed. If you're married, stay married. Your wife needs you. If you have children, they need you. Are you loosed from a wife? Do not seek a wife. Are you a single man, single woman? Not a good time to start a family, not a good time to seek a spouse. But even if you do marry, you have not sinned. Let's say, present distress, you're single, but you just feel like you've got to get married, and you get married, not a sin, not a wrong thing. Even if you do marry, you have not sinned. If a virgin marries, she has not sinned. Nevertheless, such will have trouble in the flesh, but I would spare you. Paul's simply saying this, and we need to keep this in mind, because of the present distress. Because we don't know if our country is now at war, we might say on September 12th. During the stock market crash in the early 1900s, because things are so unsteady, it may not be a good time to get married and start a family. Let's see how things are going to even out. It's that kind of mentality. And Paul says, It's going to be a hard time this season of life. I would spare you. If you're married, stay married. Your wife needs you, your husband needs you, your kids need you. If you're not married, probably not a good idea to get married. It's a tough time to start a family. Verse 29, but this I say, brethren, the time is short. Regardless of anything, the time is short. The church has always been called to live as Jesus could come at any moment, and that's not a suggestion that people don't get married. Jesus also said, occupy until I come, stay busy until I come. But the Christian needs to have the mindset, whether they are single or whether they get married and want to get married and want to raise children, that everything could change at a moment's notice. And so we always have to have that eternal perspective. I say this, brethren, the time is short, so that from now on, even those who have wives should be as though they had none. He's not saying neglect your wife. He's saying keep an eternal perspective. It's not all about your wife anymore. Keep the eternal perspective. Those who weep as though they did not weep, those who rejoice as though they did not rejoice, those who buy as though they did not possess, and those who use this world as not misusing it, for the form of this world is passing away. So the Apostle Paul is saying to them, to the Corinthians there in that moment, there's something going on, not a great time to make changes. Not a command, but Paul would say, I believe, a sanctified and holy opinion with godly wisdom attached to it. Don't make changes. If you're married, stay married. If you're single, probably a better idea to stay single right now. If you do get married, you're not sinning. But no matter what happens, keep the eternal perspective. The time is short, and I believe that's a way of saying that Jesus could come back for his church at any time. So do whatever you're going to do. It's okay. Keep the eternal perspective. Be ready to see the Lord. So some things to think about. Thanks for watching.